close in a second. Once I get out.
They said don't stick your legs out the window. Don't stick your legs out the window. Yes, they have all their body parts.
All right, Bruce, you can shut those doors. All right, Bruce, everyone's in their seats. Doors are shut, ramps are up. You have a highball when you're ready. For the final time, everyone, welcome aboard the Broadmoor and Manitou Pikes Peak Cog Railway. We'll be traveling up to a final destination elevation of 14,115 feet this morning. We have been making this trip for over 132 years. But before you write your name in our history books, I think it's quite important that you know who is in charge of your safety this morning. If you take a look all the way to the front of the train, you're going to see a glass box. In that glass box sits a man named Bruce. Bruce will be our engineer this morning. It's his job to get the train up and down the mountain safely this morning. But look what they did to him. They sat him up there all by himself. He doesn't talk to anyone, and nobody talks to him. So can we give him a little encouragement this morning, folks? Say good morning, Bruce. Good morning, Bruce. Oh, very nice. We're all so late for an 8 o'clock train. That is great to see. My name is Liam. I will be your conductor this morning. I am in charge of your guys' safety as we go up and down the mountain this morning. And while I'm here, I'll be giving you a fun and interesting narrative as we go up and down the mountain. But before I go any farther, I do have to run up and down the train to get a quick head count. So if you could tuck yourself into your seats so I can get up and down the train quickly and safely, I would greatly appreciate it. And I'll be back with you guys shortly. said before, folks, we have been making this journey for 132 years, with our first train making it to the summit on June 30th, 1891. We have run those 132 years almost continuously. We get that little asterisk here because from the years of 2018 to 2021, we actually closed down and did a major overhaul on the railway. We tore up every square inch of track, rebuilt the depot, built the bathrooms down at the end of the platforms, repainted the entire depot of the shop, extended onto it, and more importantly, purchased 3 brand new trains just like the one you're on right now. They were built by Stauder Rail in Switzerland and delivered in April and May of 2021. Well, this major renovation came through at a bill of over $100 million, and we're hoping that this major overhaul will let us run for another 132 years. Here on the Cog Railway, you'll be hearing me use the word unique to describe our railway a lot as we go up and down the mountain this morning. One of the reasons that I like to point out that we're unique is because we will not be using left or right to be pointing out our landmarks as we're going up and down the mountain. Some of you might be wondering why that's the case, and if you want to play a little game, take one to your left. Now one to your right? Yeah, that's not going to work for us this morning, but that's okay. We have come up with an ingenious solution to that, because one side of the train has 3 seats on it, the other side of the train has 2 seats on it. So as we're going up and down the mountain this morning, folks, I'll be using the 2-seat side and the 3-seat side to be pointing out the landmarks as we're going up and down the mountain. Now our first chance to practice these directions is coming up on our 2-seat side, just in front of the train. You might be able to see a big rock and a bush just off the side of the train. All right, everyone see it? That's okay. That's okay, because that's not what I want to point out to you. What I want to point out to you is actually on the other side of that rock and the other side of that bush. It's actually the world's largest diamond. Millions of years ago, it tumbled down and fell on a perfect pedestal to be presented to you guys every single day. Take a look at the magnificent diamond we have over here. Looks like that diamond on a playing card. before you guys figure it out, I think it's time for me to let the cat out of the bag. I know I said we're unique in a lot of ways, but we're not very unique in our naming schemes here, and I'll give you our first example of many. That rock we call there is Diamond Rock. Yeah, not that creative, but it's okay. We roll with it. Diamond Rock is a 900 million year old mixture of mica, feldspar, and quartz. It's so unique to this area. It's only found in the Pikes Peak region and in Missouri. Here in the Pikes Peak region is known as Pikes Peak granite. But trust me folks, this is not the granite you want to be making your countertops out of. It's actually very fragile and prone to a specific type of erosion known as ice wedging. Ice wedging is when water seeps into the cracks and crevices inside these rocks, freezes, expands, and chips away at the rocks. This is why all the rocks we'll see today are very sharp and angular. And it's also why, as we go higher and higher up the mountain, the rocks get smaller and smaller. And that's because this ice wedging process happens more and more frequently the higher we go up the mountain. Now also coming up here on our two-seat side, folks, is going to be our first of 3 named waterfalls this morning. This one is named after a husband and wife that used to live up here in the town of Manitou, Mr. Rose and his wife Emma. So we have called this cascading waterfall Rose Emma Falls in their honor. It's coming up on the two-seat side just below track level. If you're on the 3-seat side and want to try and catch a glimpse of this cascading waterfall, you're more than welcome to stand up and try and peer out the windows, but please do not stand in that center aisle.
It's a small.
Yes, it was that one.
It's not 7 falls.
Now I'm sure you guys on the 3-seat side are just starting to feel a little bit left out. All the cool things have been on the 2-seat side, but don't worry folks, you have a waterfall coming up on your side and it is so much better than the last one. Take a look at this magnificent waterfall coming up on the 3-seat side. It's actually higher than Niagara Falls, but don't look up, look straight across at what we like to call Minnehaha Falls.
Oh, it's the coffee metal.
Now I see some disappointed looks, maybe a mean glare or two, but don't worry folks, I didn't misspeak. I didn't say it was bigger or taller than Niagara Falls, I said it was higher. We're reaching an elevation of 8,300 feet, and that's actually 8,000 feet higher than the falls in Niagara. Now it's also this part of the trip that I highly encourage all of my passengers to introduce themselves to the people sitting across from them. Maybe you'll find where they're from, their favorite restaurant in town, maybe their cell phone number, social security number. Some people are more willing to give out that information than others, but it's always quite important to introduce yourself to the people sitting around you.
Not going that way.
Now I hope you all took my expert advice. One, you'll be spending the next 3 hours with them, so it's a good long time to try and make some new friends. And secondly, along our trip today, folks, we'll be going up some really steep grades. Believe it or not, one of the grades that's coming up here just around this curve is a 25% grade. That means for every 100 feet of forward motion, we gain 25 feet in vertical elevation. And at an angle like this, folks, it's not too hard to slip out of your seats into the people sitting in front of you. And it's just a little less awkward if you at least know their first names. As I said, folks, one of our first 25% grades is coming up here around this bend. This one is known as Son of a Gun Hill. It dates back to when the Cobb Railway was steam-powered. A steam engine has 2 crew members on it, a fireman and an engineer. And it was the fireman's job to shovel that coal as fast as he could to keep up the steam pressure in that locomotive to push the train cars up this steep grade. And every time, without fail, they would crest the top of this hill. The fireman would look to his engineer, wiping his brow, saying, "Whew, that hill was a son of a gun," or something like that. While we're on these grades today, folks, I do like to point out that if you take a look all the way at the front of the windshield and all the way back to that orange wall at the back of the train, that is an elevation distance of almost 4 stories. And then a common question that we get on the railway as well is, do rocks fall on the track? And yes, it is quite common this time of year. There's one the other day that was so big, I jumped out, I tried to pick it up, and I came back and I had to get Bruce's help. I quickly picked up this rock. Bruce quickly put 3 smaller rocks underneath it because I was starting to sag a little bit. I hope it's not falling again because I am not picking it back up again, folks. We're still moving, so that means we're going well. Take a look at our handiwork here on the 2-seat side, folks. Why are you guys all laughing? I promise you, me and Bruce did that just yesterday. I picked it up and he quickly put the 3 smaller rocks underneath it. And to even prove it to you folks, I let Bruce, since he did all the heavy lifting, I let him come up with that name of that new rock formation, and he came up with Prop Rock. Believe it or not, in the early 1900s, there actually used to be a hotel that used to operate here at the head of Engelman Canyon. It started out as a modest 1-room, a log cabin, but those pesky hikers kept stopping and asking for lunch. So this 1-room log cabin quickly exploded to feature 15 guest rooms, a banquet hall. It had a post office. Of course, it had a railway station. And believe it or not, since flat land is a hot commodity to have at this part of Colorado, he decided to build a 1-lane bowling alley. Unfortunately, in the 1920s, this grand establishment burnt down under mysterious circumstances. In the 1930s, it was razed and removed, leaving the only thing that we can see of these remains is a sign bearing the establishment's name, the Halfway House, coming up on the 3-seat side, just at the bottom of your windows. And the sharp-eyed passengers might notice where that rail spur used to run up to that railway station, and the Halfway House was set back here in this clearing off the 3-seat side. Now also coming up here on the 3-seat side is going to be our final named waterfall of the morning. This one is called Pipe Falls, and I'm sure you can figure out why. Yeah, it's water coming out of a pipe. And at this time of year, it's not too spectacular. It's usually just a little dribble. So take a look at her, the magnificent Pipe Falls. The reason why I like to bring up Pipe Falls, though, folks, even though it's not that grand, is because it's actually connected to one of the oldest hydroelectric plants this side of the Mississippi. It was established in the early 1900s in the small municipality of Roxton Park. And up until recently, this municipality had a population of 6. That population used to live up here in this white framed house coming up here on the 3-seat side. If you take a look at the stone foundation in the window frames, that's actually left over from the Halfway House Hotel. And if you take a look all the way to the back of that lot, you'll see a stone building back there. That is that hydroelectric plant. Yes, this hydroelectric plant does still operate and produces enough power for around 200 homes in the Manitou Springs area. Now, I'm sure someone noticed that I said that it used to have a population of 6, and you might be wondering why it used to. Well, that answer is coming up here on our 3-seat side just below track level. You might notice a car, a truck, and a winding dirt road. That winding dirt road is lovingly referred to as the caretaker's 60-mile driveway. Yes, folks, you heard me correctly. 60 miles. It runs from Runster Park around every single lake and reservoir on the side of the mountain and lets out somewhere between Cripple Creek and Divide. The reason why the family that used to live there doesn't anymore is because that house that we saw was built in the early 1930s and it was getting a little run down. Secondly, their children became school-aged and taking that 60-mile driveway twice a day, 5 days a week, became a little bit of a drag. So the Colorado Springs Utilities was nice enough to build them a brand new house, only 17 miles in on that driveway. But don't worry, folks, they still come regularly, as you can see the truck on the road, to come check up on that house and that hydroelectric plant. Now, do we have anyone on board from the state of Delaware? Anyone? No, that's okay. That's usually how that goes. A little while back, you might have noticed that we entered into Pike National Forest. Pike National Forest is 1.5 million acres in size. And now you might have thought I forgot about Delaware. I promise you I didn't. That 1.5 million acres is actually large enough to drop the entire state of Delaware into Pike National Forest and still have room around the edges to make a picture frame around the state. Of course, with 1.5 billion acres, we have plenty of wildlife to be seen. But yes, we have been operating for 132 years, and that's 132 years without success at having these wild animals adhere to our train schedule. So I'd like to emphasize, folks, that they are wild. While we're down here in the trees, keep your eyes out for moose, mule deer, black bear. You might see some squirrels and chipmunks running around too. And maybe if we're really lucky, we might get to see a mountain lion. As we go higher, the landscape changes, and of course the animals change as well. Up there, we'll be able to see some yellow-bellied whistling marmots. There's been some elk being seen the last couple of days as they migrate through the area. Rocky Mountain bighorn sheep, golden eagles, and Arctic raven. So, as you see anything outside your windows, folks, don't be selfish. Point it out to the people around you. Make some noise, because I'm sure they would like to see it just as much as you do. And now a clearing in a mountain setting is known as a park. Coming up on the 2-seat side is known as Deer Park, because in the early morning hours we might get to see some mule deer grazing. Yeah, I don't see any this morning, but that's okay. If you take a look all the way to the back of the park there, you might see some cinnamon-colored pine trees. Those pine trees are known as ponderosa pines, and they don't get that cinnamon color until they're at least 80 years old. Another interesting fact about these guys is if you come up and give them a nice big hug, you might smell vanilla or butterscotch depending on if they're hydrated or in drought. Some other interesting trees you might have noticed as we are climbing the mountain are these white bark trees on either side of the train. These are the native to Colorado aspen trees. What's interesting about these guys is they tend to grow in groves. So that means if you see 10 trees, 100 trees, or 1,000 trees, they're all one large living organism, all interconnected by one common root system, making them one of the largest land organisms on the face of the earth. Another interesting fact about these guys is if you walk up to them, and if you're on a hike and you forget your sunscreen, you can walk up to them and wipe your hands on them. You'll get a white powdery substance on your hands. That powdery substance can actually get applied to your skin, and it acts as a natural sunscreen. Has an SPF of 2. But if you're anything like me, folks, you know something is always better than nothing. Now, I didn't have any luck with Delaware, but do I have any luck with Wisconsin? Anyone from Wisconsin? Oh, I see them all the way up there. Yeah. Welcome aboard, folks. The reason why I bring up Wisconsin is because our founder, Zalman Simmons, was actually from Kenosha, Wisconsin. He came out to Colorado to inspect the insulated telegraph lines that he had invented. He had to take a 3-day burro trip to get to the top of the mountain during his inspection. And when he got to the top, he said the views at the top were absolutely spectacular. But that 3-day burro trip was the most uncivilized thing that he had ever done. While we're going up the mountain today, folks, keep an eye out off the 2-seat side up on the hill there. You might see some of this telegraph wire and some telephone poles that used to hold up the telegraph wire. So if you wanted something to keep a little I Spy game going there, take a look at that while we're going up the mountain. But you won't see it until we break tree line. Back to Zalman Simmons though. He went back to Kenosha, Wisconsin and raised a fund of $1.5 million to come up with this newly invented cog railway. And he decided that this was a great way to share the views. So he came back to Colorado and started construction in 1889 with the first train making it to the summit on June 30th, 1891. The train tickets when we first opened were $5 whole, or around $160 in today's money, which was almost a month's wage back then. Simmons was involved with the cog railway up until the 1920s when he sold it to the founder and constructor of the Broadmoor Hotel, Spencer Penrose. Spencer Penrose wanted to buy the cog railway in the hopes to shut it down, because that's what people do when they have a lot of money. They like to buy things and close them down. Because he had actually just finished refurbishing the carriage trip all the way up to the top of the mountain as an automobile road, and he saw us as his main competition. But we were just so profitable, so as you can see, we're still running up and down the mountain today. As you can see, folks, we have a big red thing in front of us. Don't worry, folks, this is another train, and we're going to be going around them nice and smoothly here on what we like to call our Mountain View siding. And you might wonder why it's called Mountain View. Yeah, I know you all got it now. It's because of the mountain view. If you take a look off the 2-seat side and up towards the mountain there, you might see the summit of Pikes Peak and that summit house up there peeking up over the edge of the mountain, where we're going to be in about a half an hour. In 1806, we had an Army lieutenant on a journey of exploration similar to that of Lewis and Clark. While Lewis and Clark were tasked with exploring the northwest boundary of the Louisiana Purchase, Zebulon Montgomery Pike was tasked with exploring the southwest boundary of the Louisiana Purchase. He was down at modern-day Pueblo when he saw this mountain off in the distance, and he thought this would be a great place to climb and survey the surrounding land. So him and his men took off. They made it to around this elevation when they got caught in waist-deep snow. They were running low on provisions, and of course they still had their summer uniforms on, so they wisely decided to turn back around. After that, Pike went on to explore down the Royal Gorge, and a little bit too far into Spanish-controlled territory, where he was captured by the Spanish. Eventually, after a couple months, his men was released, and a few months later, Pike himself was released. Like any good Army soldier, he was sent back to war. He went to go fight in the War of 1812, where he unfortunately met his demise. For those of you keeping track, that does mean that Pike never actually summited the mountain that now bears his name, but he was never selfish enough to name the mountain after himself. He called it the Grand Peak in his journals, and estimated it to be around 18,000 feet high. I don't know about you, but being off by 4,000 feet in the early 1800s, I don't think was that bad. Anyway, the reason why it was called Pikes Peak was because when the settlers and the other land grabs were coming out in the west, they were coming through Kansas, and this is the first peak that you can see as you head west. So they were all reading his journals to try and follow his path, and they said, okay, let's head out to Pikes Peak. And that's how Pikes Peak got its new name. But over the years, it has been known from many names. Before it was known as Pikes Peak, of course, the Grand Peak. Even before that, it was known as James Peak after mountaineer Edwin James, the first man of European descent to record summiting the mountain. Before that, it was known as El Capitan by the Spanish conquistadors that were in the area. Even before that, it was known as Tabacavi, or Sunshine Mountain, to the Ute Native American tribe that was in this area. Believe it or not, to the Ute Native Americans, this actually holds a very strong place in their creation story. Tabacavi means Sunshine Mountain, which is because this mountain is the first place in the surrounding area to get sunlight in the morning, which to the Utes, they believe that all life was created at the top of this mountain and then meandered its way back down to the surrounding areas. But even before the Utes were in this area, folks, there is evidence of a culture only known as the Clovis culture. They unfortunately predated written records, so we'll never know the myths and legends that they have associated with this mountain and its surrounding areas. Now we have surpassed an elevation of 10,000 feet, folks, so I'd like to remind you to try and sip some water as we're going up the mountain today, folks. It's the best way to offset any weird feelings you might get. It's also the best way to prevent you having your own personal water fountain when we get to the top, because the pressure builds up and it shoots the water out of the top of your bottle, which is a lot of fun for the people sitting around you when they see the water leap out of your bottle. But it's not so much fun for you when the water is landing in your lap. So why don't you open those bottles, relieve some pressure, and take a sip of water while you're at it as well. If you don't believe me, folks, go ahead and try it. I'm sure you'll have a nice wet lap by the time we make it to the summit. In 1893, we did have an English professor that was trying to summit the mountain. She didn't really trust that newfangled cog idea, so she took the tried and true method of taking a carriage trip up the side of the mountain. When she made it to the top, she was awestruck by the views, like very many people are when they get to the top. And in true English professor fashion, she started work on a poem. This poem wasn't really famous until it was set to a popular piece of music at the time known as Materna. Some of you might know where I'm going with this, but for those of you who don't, that poem that she wrote starts with, "Oh beautiful for spacious skies, for amber waves of grain." Yes, that poem is America the Beautiful, and that English professor was Catherine Lee Bates. This here, folks, is the reason why Pikes Peak is known as America's Mountain, because Catherine Lee Bates wrote the second runner-up to our famous national anthem, the Star-Spangled Banner, about the summit of Pikes Peak. As we come around here, folks, we'll break through the trees for just a moment and give you a good view of what we think inspired Catherine Lee Bates to write that now famous poem. Welcome, folks, to Inspiration Point. Out there, you might get a quick glimpse of Going to the Gods. That's Colorado Springs out there. And on a really clear day like today, you might be even able to see all the way out to the plains of Kansas from here.
Big out here. Like spring or something.
This is also a good time to remind everyone to please do not stand in or cross that center aisle, because I do not want to see anyone go flying, and I do not want to do the paperwork after you go flying. So please do not stand in or cross that aisle while we're moving, folks.
And you put it all the way up, it's kind of dark. You get like the sun shining in your face. Makes the down part really dark. The sun's right there.
Now, some of you might still be wondering what makes this railway so unique, other than how we point out our landmarks. Well, I'll be happy to tell you. As you can read from our name, we are known as a cog railway. The only thing that our cog railway has that is in common with modern day freight railroads is our gauge. We are 4 foot 8.5 inches across, which is standard gauge across North America. We're also getting powered up the mountain by a massive diesel electric locomotive. After that, folks, our similarities end. While we were down at the depot, folks, you might have noticed that we had a third rail running through the center of the tracks. This isn't the third rail that you hear about with subways that produce electricity to power the trains up and down the mountain. You might have actually noticed that this third rail has teeth cut into it. That is known as rack rail. That rack rail meshes with the 10 cog wheels that are underneath this train as we go up and down the mountain. And it's these cog wheels that allow us to go up and down, and more importantly, stop on these steep grades. Modern day freight railroads can only do a gradient of around 4%, with the steepest mainline freight railroad grade being the Saluda grade in North Carolina at 4.7%. Once again, folks, we're on a grade of 25% on this hill right here. And if you're a little worried about a 110-ton train getting powered up the side of the mountain on a 25% grade, let me put your mind at ease, folks. I know I said we have 10 cog wheels underneath this train, which is true, but it's only the 4 that are underneath the locomotive that are powering us up and dynamic braking us back down the mountain. And to help put your mind at ease a little bit more, if all 4 of those cog wheels are meshed into the rack rail at the same time, we're getting powered up by 8 square inches of friction. If someone needs a visible representation of 8 square inches, that is the size of your hand. That is all that is driving us up and down the mountain today, folks. And we're also unique in the fact that we're one of only 2 cog railways that are operating up in the United States and in North America. The other one being the Mount Washington Cog Railway in New Hampshire. It powers up Mount Washington. And it is actually the original cog railway, mountain cog railway, because cog railways were invented right after steam engines were, and they were used to get mine carts in and out of mine shafts. And then someone decided that it was a great way to get things up and down mountains, so they started running cog railways up mountains. But don't worry, folks. I know you're thinking that these grades are pretty steep, but we're not even close to the steepest cog railway in the world. That belongs to Mount Pilatus in Switzerland. They go up grades of an astounding 48%. That is almost double what we are on right now. Their rail cars actually have to be built like staircases so they don't fall off the side of the mountain.
Or like the incline, the railway they had went up the incline before they took it out. It was kind of built the same way, like stair steps. I don't know why they took it out though. It was amazing. Now people climb up by hand. I've been out before, that's all I know.
Taking a look out the 3-seat side, you might start catching glimpses of what is the only naturally occurring lake on this side of the mountain. This lake is known as Lake Moraine. And as we break through the trees here, you might start taking a closer look at it and being like, that lake doesn't look too naturally occurring. Well, you're kind of right. A couple years ago, Colorado Springs came in and built a dam along that lake to try and increase its bank volume. As you can see, it didn't really work because they found a mossy bog at the bottom, so it just holds about the same amount of water as it did in the first place. And some of you might have noticed that road that winds across the dam at Lake Moraine and cuts across the mountain across from us. That is still the caretaker's 60-mile driveway. Now, also coming up here on the 3-seat side, just below track level, you're going to see some bristlecone pine trees. You're going to see one that is a little bit wider, a little bit fatter, looks a little bit more dead than the others. That is because this is the oldest tree on the side of the mountain. This tree coming up here is 2,200 years old. If you're having trouble looking for it, like I said, look for the fattest tree down there, the one that looks half dead and half alive. It's right on the tree line just below track level coming up here. Now for those of you on the two-seat side, I do have a tree for you coming up here on the two-seat side just up the mountain. We do have bristlecone pine trees as well, but these are only babies. They're only around 200 to 300 years old. And then if we take our gazes back out to the mountain across from us on the three-seat side, that is known as Mount Magre. The original section crew working on the railway used to call it Mount Baldy because of its receding tree line. But more commonly today it's known as Calendar Mountain because it stands 12,365 feet tall. It also gives you a good example of what tree line looks like. As you can see, folks, we have just finally broken through tree line on this side of the mountain. It's around 11,500 feet as we come up here. But if you take a look around, you might see that life still holds on up here. Just because trees don't live up here doesn't mean that nothing does. While we're up here, you'll be able to see the Arctic tundra, some lichen, some Rocky Mountain bighorn sheep, yellow-bellied marmots, some pika, Arctic raven, and golden eagles as well. But like as I said, just because physical life doesn't exist up here doesn't mean life doesn't exist at all. Now some of you might be wondering why trees actually don't exist up here, and that's because of the harsh conditions. We get high winds, cold temperatures, and a lot of snow up here. And also the steepness of the mountain as we get up to the summit also makes it harder for trees to grow. It's also a Arctic climate zone up here, folks. This is the same climate zone that you find in the Arctic Circle at the North and South Poles. The only difference is that we had to come up only 12,000 feet to get here. We do have the permanent frost underneath the ground. Of course, we have what we call Arctic tundra and Arctic ravens. So it is still the same climate zone that you find in the North Polar Circle and the Southern Polar Circle. And now we're coming up to the center of our track that we like to call Windy Point. And why do you think we call it Windy Point? Because it's windy. We have seen winds coming through this cut coming up here at an excess of 188 miles an hour. And that's up until our weather equipment broke. So I'm sure the winds got much higher than that. Some of you daredevils with your windows still open, you might notice that the wind has started to pick up as we get higher and higher up the mountain. And you'll also notice that the temperatures drop quicker and quicker the higher we go. So as we go up the mountain, please be considerate to those people sitting around you, folks. If you see your neighbor shivering, seeing their face turning blue, please be considerate and close the windows. Just because you are warm doesn't mean that the people sitting around from you, sitting across from you, or next to you, or across the aisle from you, are warm as well. Now I'd like to welcome all of you to Windy Point. As we're rolling through Windy Point here, if you take a look off your two-seat side at the stone building here, this is the original section crew house. The original section crew, the foreman, the entire section crew, and the foreman's family used to live in this house all summer long. They used to live here all summer long. They used to hike up and down the mountain to wherever the work needed to get done on the mountain for that day. But don't worry, folks, our modern day section crew don't live up here anymore. Well, we do have some wildlife up here on our three-seat side of the meadow down there. But the modern day section crew does live in their modern day homes with their modern families back down in Colorado Springs and Manitou Springs. And and take the train to where they need to go as we go up and down the mountain. Now, as we're rolling through Windy Point, I do have some important information to pass on to everyone. If you haven't been listening to my spiel the entire time up the mountain, that's quite all right. That's up to you. But please listen to what I'm about to tell you right now. It involves getting you off the mountain, which some of you might find quite important. If you all take out your timekeeping devices, whether that's your cell phone, your watch, your sundial, or your spouse, please take it out or tap them on the shoulder and make them listen to what I'm about to tell you. We're going to synchronize our watches. Okay, my watch says 8:46. Please make sure your watch timekeeping device is close to what my watch says. Because I know a lot of you haven't really ridden on railroads before, but you quickly find out that a conductor's watch is never wrong. So please, make sure that your timekeeping device is close to mine. It says 8:46. We will be leaving the summit today at 10 o'clock sharp. 10 o'clock sharp. We will begin boarding at 9:50. At 9:50, I will go into the Summit House and give you an audible announcement over the Summit House PA system to tell you that this is your 10-minute warning. Please make your way back to the train. If you're outside the Summit House, you'll be hearing 3 long blasts of the whistle. That is also your audible cue to start making your way back to the train. At 5 minutes till departure, Bruce will blow one long, horrific sound out of this train. That is your cue to start running back to the train, folks. Because do we have any idea what we call someone who shows up to the train at 10:01? Late is always a good guess. We like to call them hikers because it's a 13-mile hike back down to your car in Manitou Springs.
It's not a fun hike.
And you think I'm joking? I am not. Being on the train and at the train at 10 o'clock are two very different states of being. So please do not be late, folks. While you're up there, you're more than welcome to use the restroom, visit the gift shop, go to the cafeteria. But there are no garbage cans out on the platform. So if you do accumulate any garbage while you're in the Summit House, please throw it away before you come back to the train. The Summit House is also operated by the City of Colorado Springs, so it's still considered outside food or beverage. So please, if you can, do not bring it back to the train. Please throw it out in the Summit House. Like I said, we do not have any garbage cans out here out on the platforms because bears don't like to come up to 14,000 feet, but they do like to come up for some yummy donuts, and we found that out quite quickly, so all the garbage cans got taken off the Summit platforms. So please, make sure you throw out any garbage you accumulate in the Summit House. Now we're coming up here to a dip in the mountainside that we like to call the saddle, because it looks like the saddle of a horse. Yes, I know. I just like keep pointing out how unique we are in our naming schemes here, folks. The saddle is the only place along our trip that you can look both east and west simply by turning your heads. If you look off the two-seat side, you're looking east towards Colorado Springs, Black Forest, Kansas, and Wyoming. And then as we come around the bend here, if you want to shift your gaze off to the three-seat side, you'll see those mountains off in the distance there. That is the Continental Divide. That mountain range runs from Alaska through Canada, North America, Central South America, ends in Patagonia, Argentina. Yes, this is the mountain range that if you drop water on the west side of the mountain, it does make its way into the Pacific, and if you drop water on the east side of the mountains, it makes its way back to the Atlantic. Now, I didn't have any luck with Delaware. I did have some luck with Wisconsin, but this state never lets me down here. Folks, do we have anyone on board from Texas? Wow, that was disappointing, Texas. Can we try that again, folks? Do we have anyone on board from Texas? Oh, there we go. That sounds more like it, Texans. Now, I hear that everything is bigger and better in Texas. Do we still believe that? Ooh, I was hoping you weren't going to say that. Because if you take a look here off our two-seat side, this is only one of many examples of what we like to call in Colorado gravel. here in just a moment, we'll be coming around a curve that we like to call the dark turn. That's because it just gets a little bit darker from here on up with our stories that we tell. In just a moment here on the two-seat side, we'll be passing the grave of one of our original section crew members. But don't worry, folks, it's not the grave of a human, it's actually the grave of a donkey. This donkey's name was Mr. Man. And of course, the late 1800s, we didn't have power tools up here. We had hand tools, just hard work, and donkeys. Unfortunately, on this fateful day, Mr. Man was tasked with carrying dynamite up until the work site when he was struck by lightning. That sent Mr. Man flying in 17 different directions. And since the section crew had just lost one of their guys, they decided to go pick up every single ooey gooey piece of Mr. Man, dig him a nice grave right next to the railroad tracks, covered him up, built him a nice wooden cross that we can still see today, and gave him full-on whiskey shots and eulogies in honor of his sacrifice. And so he can watch his handiwork go up and down the mountain for many eternities to come. He's coming up here on the two-seat side, folks. You can finally see him. The snow has finally melted away from his grave. He's a very distinct grave with a wooden cross coming up here on the two-seat side, just below track level, just off of the tracks.
25 shots, Jason.
There he goes, folks. Mr. Man. Now, if you're also taking a look back off your three-seat side here, folks, you see that zigzag out there in those trees out there right next to that reservoir? Yeah, that's still the caretaker's 60-mile driveway. If you bring your eyes closer to us on this meadow here right across from us, as we've been going up, just out there you might see what looks like a hiking trail. Actually, believe it or not, folks, that is one of the original carriage trails up to the side of the mountain, and it is perfectly preserved. It is not maintained in any way. Arctic tundra up here grows at least 1 inch every 100 years. So that makes this environment very fragile, folks. That means while you're up on the summit, please stay on the paths. Do not walk off the paths and explore too far. You don't want to fall off the mountain. But it's also an example of how delicate this ecosystem is up here, folks. Because if you damage it in any way, as you can see, folks, it will outlast any one of us that are living on this train. So be very aware where you're walking. Please do not feed the animals, and please stay on the tracks while you're up there as well. While we're taking a look here off the three-seat side, you might see a cleared off mountain out there that stands out from the rest. It might look like it has a little bit of excavation done to it and some buildings built on top of it. That's because it does. That is the Cripple Creek and Victor gold mine. It was founded in 1890, and to this day it's still one of the most lucrative gold mines on the face of the earth. It pulls out $1.5 million of precious metal out of that mine every single day. This is part of the reason why Cripple Creek and Victor are called the gold mining capital of the world. And also in the mid-1800s, when Colorado was becoming a state, because of all the money that was being produced by all the gold mining claims that were out there in Cripple Creek, it was actually in the very close running to be the state capital, but was quickly beaten out by Denver as before. I do have one more sad story to tell you guys. In 1913, there was a newlywed couple that were hiking up Pikes Peak, as many people did at this time of year. They were hiking up in the middle of August when they were getting stopped multiple times by train crews that were working their way up and down the mountains. They were saying, hey guys, you might want to jump on because we're expecting to get a heavy snowstorm tonight. The couple, being from Texas, looked the engineer straight in the eye and then burst out in laughter every single time, saying, it's August. There's gonna be no snow up here. You must be trying to pull a prank on us. Well, I promise you folks, we weren't pulling a prank on them. It was just the next morning, they made it 8.7 miles of the 8.9 miles of track. Back in those days, instead of having radios, they had a man on the summit that would hike down to around where we are right now, what we like to call the flagpole. He would raise a flag up on a flagpole that we could see back there at Windy Point to tell us if we were clear to go up and down the mountain for the day. It was him who found these people at the 8.7 miles with their hands covering their faces, frozen to death. So, when they sent a special train out to bring them back down, and before they moved them, back in those days, they took a picture of them, lying there in the snow. But don't worry folks, that's not even the worst part. We actually have that picture as a postcard back down in our gift shop down in Manitou Springs, if any one of you are curious. Just go into our gift shop down in Manitou Springs and ask for the dead couple, and they'll point you in the right direction. And if you think I'm kidding, folks, I'm dead serious. Now, if you think that's not ironic enough, when they were going through their belongings, they found a note in the man's pocket saying, congratulations on your wedding. I hope you enjoy your new jacket. Just don't freeze to death in Colorado. And this story here, folks, is the reason why our last turn that we are going to be coming through here is what we like to call Ghost Corner. And as we make our way through these curves, folks, you might be able to spot another cross, another wooden cross, just like Mr. Man's, that marks the place where these people were found in their memory. As we make our way around this bend, you might notice a zigzag running up the opposite side of the mountain from us here. You might notice a car or two, or even a school bus. This is the famous Pikes Peak Highway. This highway is famous for being the second highest automobile road in North America, but it is even more famous for hosting the highest race in the world. These racers come at the end of June to run the top 12.42 miles of the Pikes Peak Highway. As they run up the mountain, they will be going through 156 hairpin curves, folks, at speeds topping out at almost 200 miles an hour. To put that to scale, folks, if you were to run from bottom to top, it would take you about an hour and a half if you're daring enough to do the speed limit. These men and women here that run this race do it in under 10 minutes, with the record being set in 2018 by a Frenchman named Romain Dumas at 7 minutes and 57 seconds. As we come up to one of these hairpin curves here that we like to call Cop Corner, you might notice that there are no guardrails here, folks. That's because there's only guardrails on the highway to protect the mountain from you, not you from the mountain. It also might be a burning question in someone's mind is, do we have cars end up on our tracks during race week and tests? And the answer is yes. It does happen quite frequently that they shoot off Cop Corner just going a little too fast. and end up shooting across the rocks, shooting across our tracks, and ending up on the far side of our tracks. And then we have to tow them all the way back across again. And as you can imagine, the cars don't really like getting tracked across railroad tracks. Now, as we approach the summit, if you still have your windows open, I would like to ask you to please raise them, because we want to come back to a big red train, not a big red refrigerator. Also, please, a reminder, use the restrooms, refill your water bottles before you head back to the train, because I am many things on this railway, but I am not a plumber. I do not magically add restrooms onto the train while you guys have your hour on the summit here. Now, I do need a little reminder from you guys though, folks. What time do we begin boarding? 9:50. What time do we leave the summit? And what time do you become a hiker? 10:01. Very good, folks. Please do not be late once again. As we're coming up onto the summit, please mind your step. There is a big gap between the train and the platform that is still present, just like it was back down at the depot. So please, if you have little children with you, make sure you watch your step as you jump off the mountain, jump off the train. Yeah, please don't jump off the mountain. That is even more paperwork. As we're coming up here, oh, we do have a bighorn sheep there off on our 2-seat side there. Now, if anyone who is looking at that bighorn sheep wants to take, in car 1 wants to take a look down, you're going to see what we like to call a devil's slide. That you're going to be seeing in just a moment, a 2,000-foot drop. That is almost straight down off the train tracks here, folks. We like to call this devil's slide. Yeah, I know, folks, that drop off in car 2 and 3 is not devil's slide. It's coming. Just be patient. Here. This is devil's slide right here. There you go. Take a look at that, folks. A 2,000-foot drop right there. In the wintertime, there are people who actually ski down this zerk right here because we do get enough snow up here. Now, as we crest the summit and you're done taking a look at Devil's Slide, I please ask you to please retake your seats until the train has come to a full and complete stop. You'll know the train has come to a full and complete stop because the train will stop. You'll hear the brakes set, the doors will open, and the whistle will sound. Once the doors open, you're more than welcome to stand up and deboard the train. But here we are, folks. Give yourself a hand. You made it 14,115 feet. You made it to the summit of Pikes Peak.
I drank the whole water bottle. No drones. You get the hat on and everything. He's ready for the. Let's get prepared. I mean, there's snow up there. So, I'm snowman. I'm doing a snowman. That guy, but I'm doing